Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing cool. I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good. Let me just turn the volume up a little bit so
How do I
I'm
say
sure.
how do I say your name?
Uh,
Excuse me.
Marilu.
Marilu.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining. I'm really excited for our talk today, and
Yeah, me
I think
too.
it's going to be very beneficial to a lot of people. So I think if you don't mind, we can dive right in.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself? Just what you do, a little bit of background. I know I've mentioned it in the post, but as they say, it's better to hear from the horse's mouth.
So yeah, so I'm Kev. I'm Breatheolution. I established Breatheolution in 2020. I've been working with people with anxiety, panic disorder. People have got complex trauma, PTSD. Um, And just generally people that are in sort of dysregulation, really, nervous systems that are not regulated. And I've worked with a myriad of people, over 3,000 people I've taken into the cold to do cold water therapy with, and I've been practicing breath work and biomechanics, biochemistry, working with the likes of Patrick McKeown in Ireland, studied with him and picked up some qualifications there as well. So it's been amazing. Last 4 years has been busy, to say the least.
I
Yeah,
can imagine. Yeah, so no, that's amazing, and that's quite a record of 3,000 people
yeah,
taking
it's a lot of
taking them on
people.
that journey. It's really amazing.
Sure, yeah, and it's been emotional. I've taken people in, as young as like 10 years old. Some people, some kids have got in right at the beginning, to the ages, about 76. So,
Wow.
taking in people from all walks of life. And yeah, it's been very educational. There's nothing I've
Yeah,
not witnessed or seen in the cold, and I've seen loads of stuff with the breath workers too. It's been really, really interesting to witness, human reaction and to hear people's stories. Really, it's been
yeah,
fascinating. Just gives you a real kind of bird's eye view of what's going on with mental health. Really,
yeah.
it's been fascinating.
Yeah, because you hear all these talks about, how the system is not coping and, people aren't coping, and you don't really see the detrimental effect of it until you're like in the thick of it.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think I kind of want to ask, like, how did you start on this, what brought you to this point? Like, what brought you to start Breatheolution?
Yeah, just by mistake, really, because I'm a mechanic by trade. Although I was on the railway for 10 years in a sort of safety critical role with those. And um, I've had ADHD all my life. I've had asthma, struggled with my breathing, but I've also struggled with addiction as well.
Mm,
A lot of the time they do kind of come hand in hand, I have noticed.
mm.
Um, so there is links there with that. And I struggled with addiction for years and almost drank myself to death at one point. Um,
Wow.
and then eventually, stopped drinking, and it was enough sort of time and space then that I sort of had to look into this breath work. I read Wim Hof's book about 5 years ago, Becoming the Iceman, and I didn't really do any sort of breathing or practice any breath work at the time. But just on an off occasion, I just thought I'm just going to give it a go and see what
Mm,
happens. So I did. I went outside, I tried it, and it was life changing. It made me so emotional. This technique, and I thought, well, I was just so interested as to why that happened. So I
mm.
carried on, and then I met this guy, and he said he was going to go into the reservoir. I went into the reservoir with him, dipped into the cold, and I was obsessed with it after
Yeah,
that because I didn't know it at the time, but it was giving me slow release dopamine.
yeah,
It was making me feel amazing,
yeah.
when I was kind of, still kind of struggling with trying to be sober,
Mm.
sort of 6 to 8 months into my sobriety, and it really helped me. It really did, and for the first time in, probably 15 to 18 years, it was the first time I didn't want a drink, as
That's
opposed to
amazing.
not needing one. And it was really
Mm.
different that I thought I don't want one anymore. and that was, yeah, it was a game changer for me. It really was. It improved my sleep and everything. It just, it really did. It was life changing.
Yeah, it's quite significant when you were struggling with addiction and you go from that mindset from I don't need it anymore and now I don't want it anymore. So that's quite like like a wow, a
Yeah, it's a
wow
breakthrough.
moment. It's really significant, and I think then a lot of things click into place, and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I've conquered this hill, you know. It's not my I'm not its slave anymore. It's not my master anymore, and you know, I'm taking control, and I think that's so powerful and it's so empowering to get to that
Oh,
stage. So I think it's absolutely amazing, you know, that you yourself went through this journey, and you know you can speak from actual experience as well, because it's a lot of the times when you get kind of coaches and teachers, it kind of feels a bit disconnected when someone's sitting across from the room and you don't even understand, like, you know, they're talking at you, and you know it's not really, you're like, okay, well, you know, how do you know what I'm going through?
no, it's got to be relatable.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that's probably what's helped me along the way, Marilu, to be honest. It's been relatability, and with maybe a bit of charisma in there. I don't know, so people say, but it's definitely helped, to be relatable, to be able to talk to people, and especially, more than anything recently, men. Being able to talk to men on a level and be completely and utterly vulnerable
yeah,
with men who are just not used to sitting in their vulnerability.
yeah.
That's definitely been life changing for so many men that I've worked with. So, I'm really, really kind of proud of that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
been
so
hard.
necessary in today's like in today's culture as well, you know,
Mm,
with the statistics that's coming out on men's mental health.
yeah,
So that is absolutely crucial. So that it's great that you're able to reach that kind of audience. And, you
no,
know, like you said, it's not intrinsic in male nature to be vulnerable.
no,
It's quite interesting, you know, that you at least you can get into, like, you can tap into that, and you know they feel safe and comfortable with you, and um you have that platform to do that. It's absolutely amazing.
yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's all based on safety, which is what we spoke about on the phone.
Mm,
My coaching and the workshops that I run is based on very fundamental lessons, evolutionary lessons, and safety is a huge part of that for human condition and habit, and and it's connected to a myriad of issues like ADHD. It's connected to safety and vulnerability. So we need to look at what's making people safe and what's making them feel unsafe,
yeah,
and identifying what those triggers are. Some of them are external, some of them are interoceptive noises in your nervous system that, like a stuck record, you just can't get out of it.
yeah,
And, really what we're trying to do is not show people what they are, but teach them to try and find them
yeah.
themselves,
Mm.
and just kind of show them the way, really. Just connect the dots, like you mentioned before, connecting the dots.
Yeah. 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 It's just going on that journey of self-discovery, because it's a lot more powerful when they come to that conclusion themselves, as opposed to someone just telling them. Because you have to dig a little bit, and you have to dig through all the dirt and the grime
Mm.
to find the gems sometimes.
You do
So
it, yeah,
it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant, but I feel like it makes a better person. You know, it makes for a better person at the end of the day, and a more resilient person at the end of the day. And that's kind of what you strive to, is that resilience, so that when something else comes your way, it doesn't knock you down for
sure.
as long period. So I don't know if you want to get into the juicy bits of what you do, and kind of just go. Do you want to touch on the cold exposure first, and kind of like just the science a little bit behind that, or do you want to dive into the breathing advanced oxygen breathe advantage first?
I'm easy either way. I think I might as well just cover the cold water bit and get that out of the way.
Yeah.
What probably most people sort of recognise before is doing the cold water stuff, and I reacted like anybody else when I got in, hyperventilating, gasping, wanting to get out. In fact, I think the first time sort of got in and got out and then got back in again. Obviously, I've had people do that with me as well, and yeah, if you get into cold water, the body doesn't like it. So you know, we're using the cold as a stressor on the body to try and build resilience. And obviously, there's some huge names like Wim Hof, who's brought this to the front so that everybody can see it. And you know, it's a real craze that's just sort of it's running all over the world now. You know, everybody wants to get into cold baths and ice tanks and getting into the sea and wild water swimming. No, this wild water swimming, it's been going on for years, in fact centuries. But now there's a real influx of people that are jumping on it and you know, and finding, you know, huge benefits with it, you know, mental, physical benefits with it. And it's been eye-opening for people, just something so simple, how it can make you feel so great, mainly because it feels kind of shit, really. Because it's not nice, you know, when you get into the cold, depending on how cold the water is, you know, it's not a nice feeling on the body.
No. And I think it relates back to that, you know, a little bit of stress is not a good thing, because it's essentially what drives us, because your kind of like your noradrenaline and that kind of stuff rises, and that's crucial to kind of motivation as well. So it's very important to, you know, have healthy stress. And I think that's the important distinguishing factor, you know, it's like helping people deal with stress in a healthy manner, but also not eliminating the stress, and just like training them about their response towards the stress. Because there's some very interesting, you know, science behind the cold exposure and the mammalian diving response, and how that influences you to kind of control your breathing and your heart rate, and that kind of through the vagus nerve, and then running into the parasympathetic nervous system, and that helps you kind of like lower inflammation, reduce your cortisol levels, and that's really what you want to do at the end of the day, is kind of like reduce that inflammation, because that has a direct link to mental health issues and anxiety and depression.
Yeah, 100%. And all the things that you mentioned there, you know, the parasympathetic nervous systems, and pushing those systems in several directions, because they're not separate things. You know, people say, oh, I'm in a parasympathetic state. You know, you kind of are and you're not. You know, the parasympathetic and sympathetic, they're constantly working alongside one another every split second.
It's Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So you're not going to
it's alive and dead at the same time.
Exactly, yeah. So I think it's just trying to stress your body in as many different ways as possible, really, being uncomfortable in as many ways as you can. You know, like this sort of thing, if you don't like doing it, if you don't like doing videos, if you don't like hearing your own voice, doing those things and being comfortable with them eventually, that's building resilience. You know, it's like the first time you go, your first day you start your job, it's like you're nervous, you're frightened, you're not quite as good at it. After a period of time, you become fluid and you become resilient, and then you're showing other people how to do it. So it changes, you know. And human beings, we're great adapters. You know, the human body and the human mind, it's amazing at adaptation. You know, this is how we've made it this far, is by being uncomfortable. The thing is, the trouble is these days is that we find out that we're kind of too sedentary, really. We're too comfortable, we're too warm, we're too cozy, we have too much food, we have too much comfortableness. Things are too handy. You know, these things, these phones, you know, we can just buy whatever we want. Things can be delivered to the door. We go from a central heated house a heated car, to a central heated supermarket. We get in with our North Face clothes on and stuff like that, and our thermal wear. We get back in the car, back home into electric blankets, heated seats. We're too comfortable, you know, and our ancestors were really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So really what we need to do is take some lessons from those guys in how to build real resilience. But to do that, you've got to get cold, you've got to go up mountains, you've got to swim underwater, you've got to change pressures, you've got to mess around with your homeostasis a little bit, you've got to mess around with your mental state a little bit, and you've got to try and improve your sleep. And it's an accumulation of all these things together to find equilibrium, not just one thing. The cold isn't going to do it alone. You're going to have to do some kind of breath work as well. You're going to have to eat properly. You're going to have to eat less sugar. You're going to have to exercise, move, yoga. You're going to have to do a myriad of all these different things to try and improve.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that, you know, like I think a lot of the times people kind of fixate on one thing and they think that is like the silver bullet to everything, and that's the ultimate cure. And it's not. It's all these different parts playing a role in, like you said, finding that equilibrium. And you know, it's always interesting to me that what like I lost my train of thought. It happens.
That's
But
okay.
yeah, it's always interesting when you know people kind of like think, okay, we're just going to focus on this one aspect and that's going to solve everything. And like you mentioned, we're too comfortable. Like, you know, we need that little bit of stress or uncomfortableness to kind of drive us, and so that we can have goals and set goals and, you know, work towards something. Like you mentioned, the ancestors, our ancestors they had goals. They needed to survive, and to do that they needed to find shelter, not always in the same place. They needed to find food. You know, it wasn't as readily available as food is today, and like it makes us, like you said, sedentary, and it makes us lazy. And I think that's the quickest way that, you know, culture kind of starts declining, is when it becomes lazy and too comfortable. And I think we had this conversation a little bit on the phone, and like if you look at different countries, like a developed country versus a developing country, like how developing countries, like they somehow find joy in things more, and they have a more can-do attitude about things and don't just accept things for what they are, and they're very resilient. Yes, there's probably a lot of trauma that comes along with the state they're in, so it's again finding, you know, a little bit of a balance, but they you know, they are a little bit more resilient as opposed to someone from a developing country, which is quite interesting. And I think definitely there's something there to kind of investigate, and, you know, there's some truth there.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to look at the statistics of ill health in places like that, you know, where they're a bit more resilient, and, you know, where's cardiovascular disease, where's obesity in those places, you know, is it going to be lower? Probably. You know, and the fact is that, you know, we're more and more comfortable every day, you know, and generally I think, I mean, I listen to so many podcasts about resilience and stress and how to beat stress. And the only way to really beat stress is to look at it and look at your own stress, look at how you get stressed. And everybody's just so different. All this information that we're using is obviously, it's really anecdotal information because everybody is completely different. Their conscious experience is different in life. So not everybody gets stressed the same way. So what you have to do really is kind of look at the self, and sometimes that's difficult to do in itself. It's awkward, you know, depending on what your past has been. It can be very, very difficult to do, and people generally, they don't want to be uncomfortable, and a lot of this work really is making people uncomfortable. And that's why, you know, generally people say, no, it's not for me, I don't want to. No, they literally put the guard up, and they won't do it. And you know, you tend to find this culture now is so comfortable. A lot of people would just rather take the pill. They'd rather just use the inhaler. They'd rather just put a sticking plaster over it. I'm just happy doing that, which is fine, no problem. But generally, you're not going to be optimum if you follow that path. You know, you need to sort of do the work. You know, and that means that you have to be uncomfortable. And generally, you have to do that on your own. You know, you can't do it. Coach can't make you do it. You can't do it really in a group session. You know, group sessions are great while you're in the group, but generally, you're going to find all your stuff when you're on your own. You know, and that's why I train people one-to-one. That's why I've done so many one-to-ones, because I say to them, look, go home, get in it on your own, then see how you feel. Tell me how you felt when you're getting it on your own. Very different journal. Write about it. Write about how much more uncomfortable you felt on your own. Have a look at that. What is that? You know, because I have spoken to so many people that say, yeah, we go to these big open events and we get into these giant ice tubs, you know, and these big ice tanks, and they say they have an amazing time. It's great fun. But then they go home and they get into 4 degrees higher temperature, and they can't do it. I got in, but I just had to get out. I said, well, you know, that's 4 degrees warmer than what you got into at the place where you went to with all your friends and stuff. So what's the difference? The difference is we're on your own. And the nervous system reacts very differently when it's on its own, you know? So this is what I would say to people, you know, confront that, whatever that is for you, you confront it. You know, breath work is a little bit different. You have to be careful sort of doing any kind of breath work on your own. You know, you're best being supervised by somebody. But generally, the cold, you know, you can do that on your own and master it on your own. But you don't need 5 degrees to do it. You know, you can do it in 10 or 15 degrees. There's no problem at all. You know, this fallacy that people have to get into ice baths, it's not necessary. You know, there's value to it eventually, but at the beginning you don't have to go anywhere near that cold. You just have to be uncomfortable. Marginal gain.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And you know, I think that's what kind of, you know, causes a lot of fear in people as well, is that I can't do 4 degrees or whatever. You know, it's like you don't have to, like you said, it's you can take a cold shower. Like start with that. Start with just putting your face underneath the cold shower, because that's what's activating that system response. You know, and start small. And I think this is a big thing with a lot of things in life, is we try to take on too much, and then we get overwhelmed and we withdraw. So it's just about bite sizes and being consistent and consistently doing those small bite sizes until you can manage a bigger chunk.
Sure.
And yeah, like, you know, like you said, it's the cold exposure you can do, you can get into it, and then you can start doing it in the comfort of your own home. You don't need fancy equipment, because I know a lot of people have been flocking to buy, you know, all these fancy ice baths, and it's massively expensive, and it's not necessary. It's like you can do it in the comfort of your own home. Start there, and then when you're comfortable, you can reach out to someone if you want to, like with yourself, a guided journey, you know, and some assistance with regard to that, and bring the breath work into that.
Yeah, and of course you don't need to use the breath work for the cold. It's not necessary.
No.
They're separate things. And you know, people are assuming that you have to breathe before you get into the cold. You don't. You can do, and there's certain breath practices that you can do that will help you to get you to sort of level your nervous system, or at least prepare your nervous system to get into the cold. But it's generally not necessary. And again, this is all different with different individual people, you know, and everybody's reaction to the cold is completely different. And what you're experiencing on the day isn't necessarily what you're experiencing on the day. Some of it is the past that you're experiencing, because generally the nervous system reacts to the past. Because everything that it kind of witnesses, it has to use the past to regulate what you're in, and obviously probably psychologists and scientists. I'm not a scientist, but they would agree that the nervous system is picking up what it's learned in the past. From very, very early on. The minute we come out, the brain is learning exactly what's going on around it in its environment, internally and externally. And day-to-day life is exactly the same. So getting in the cold is exactly the same as that. So a lot of the time, the reactions that you witness from people, some of it's the past. Some of these avoidance behaviours that people have when they get into the cold, like closing their eyes and dropping their heads, and these are all kind of movements that are connected to avoidance. This sort of head down, bowing the head down. Sometimes it's intentional, which is okay, but sometimes it happens by habit. The positions that we put ourselves in before we get in the cold. If you really want to go into something and take something away from it, and you want to be comfortable, why would you get into something where you want to try and be comfortable like this? Because I don't look comfortable. I'm frantic. My head's down. My hands are clenched. And this is how you've looked and felt in the past, and this is where your fascia has been in the past when you've been frightened. So why would you put your body in a position like that when you're trying to get used to something that feels uncomfortable? You kind of have to have your hands open, and you have to be in command. And that's not easy to do in 8, 9, 10 degree water, because it's trying to take your breath away, and it's trying to get you to come out. It doesn't want you to be uncomfortable. Your nervous system wants you to be comfortable, regulated all the time, really.
No, it is like you said. It's like you can see how they withdraw into themselves, with that kind of position and posture, and there's also this technique that they do in some therapies. It's like the 7-year back kind of technique, and it goes back 7 years, and then you ask them like what happened. So it's taking them back to a moment in their life and actively making them think about that. And like you said, like the body keeps score. And unfortunately, it remembers the traumas, it remembers the hard times that we went through, and it stores it. So because ultimately the body can't distinguish between necessarily like a bad experience and something that's just negative. Like it can't distinguish degrees of negativity. So it just responds in a certain manner, and it puts you in a certain state. So so it's interesting when it's like, okay, something happened in their past, and it may not have been that significant, but the body doesn't know that, so it still has that response, and it's figuring out why do we have that response, and is that a rational response to have, and then working through it. I mean, I think another thing to remember is, like, for some people, stubbing their toe is the worst thing that's ever happened to them because they've never stubbed their toe before. So it's the same thing going through certain things in life. It's like if they go through a certain experience in life, that may be the worst thing that they've ever experienced before, because they've never been through it. And that's all their body remembers, is that was a horrific experience. Not to say that it was necessarily, but then working through that and, creating that resilience towards that experience.
Sure. Yeah, and from an evolutionary perspective, if the organism didn't react like that, we'd all be dead already, or we wouldn't exist. Because if it had time to think, it wouldn't work, would it? It's got to be a response. It's got to be a reaction that will get us back to safety initially, which is the release of adrenaline, noradrenaline, your pupils dilate, you get this rush of blood to your limbs to get you ready to fight or run off. It's got to put you into that response, and okay, this is what's happening obviously when you're getting into the cold. All right, a little bit different because you're getting blood vessel constriction, you're getting vasoconstriction, but you're going into fight or flight. It doesn't really want you in there, so it'll do anything to get you out, which is what it does sometimes. And sometimes people, when they get into the cold, they have they kind of have nervous laughs, and sometimes I'm taking people in, one-to-one, and sometimes they'll start to giggle. And it's just me and them there. I've not said anything. I've just said, follow your breath. And they start giggling and sort of looking around and maybe looking for exits a bit, trying to check in about and start giggling. And I'm like, what are you laughing at? I don't know. I just feel like, I just feel giddy. I just feel like laughing. Is that a response to try and get you to come out? Is it something in the past? Maybe in a social situation in the past where you've been uncomfortable, where you've laughed and it's regulated you and got you back to normal again, back to safety. So is it a habit? Is laughter in uncomfortable situations a habit? Maybe it is. So if you try and cut that off, you don't leave that in the code. You take that resilience with you. So the next time that you're potentially in a situation where you normally have that nervous laugh, maybe it's not happening as much anymore because you're regulating your nervous system in a stressful situation using the cold.
Yes, that's so true. And what's interesting is what happens kind of after that first initial, shock response is that you start realizing that you're not in danger. Your body calms and it sends oxygen and blood to the vital organs as opposed to the limbs. So it kind of redirects the blood flow to the brain, the heart, and that helps you kind of control your breathing, your heart rate, and that brings that equilibrium. So that it's such an important, process to go through. And someone else mentioned something about, your receptive fields, and that's such a good way of explaining, it's not just the stresses that we face, but it's our receptive fields and how we receive and respond to those stresses that matters. So I don't know if you want to touch a little bit on your breathing, advanced breathing advantage.
Sure. And the breathing is an important part of regulating when you're getting into the cold, as you just touched upon then. So if you're breathing rapidly and you're following the nervous system's response of fear and shock, then that's generally how you're going to feel. And it would be, a lot harder to regulate your nervous system and acclimatize to the cold. So just by focusing on your breathing and breathing in a regular, slow pattern, you're going to be able to regulate your nervous system far more effectively. So this is why generally when we're taking people into the cold, as instructors, we don't want people gasping. We don't want people's breath being taken away. We don't want people breathing fast or their breath being taken away, because so much of that is connected to the past, which is why maybe, try getting into maybe 10 degrees first, 10 or 11 degrees maybe, rather than getting straight into 4 degrees. It's a bit like saying to somebody who's, and this is, no offense to people that are overweight, but somebody who's morbidly obese and put a pair of trainers on and go for a marathon. You wouldn't do that. What you'd do is you'd start running gently, or you start exercising gently and work your way up. Or you're relatively healthy and fit, and you were starting to do some running. You wouldn't go out and run a marathon. You'd just maybe run a few K or whatever. You have to sort of do these things gradually to let the body get used to it. So breath work is probably the same, really. You just have to, take it quite gently to begin with. And the most important thing, I think, is, Marilu, is understanding your own physiology and anatomy. Understand how your body works, and we're not taught in school how our bodies work. We're taught some amazing things at school, but the important things is, is how do we work? What is this thing? What is anxiety? What is a panic attack? What's going on in my physiology? No doubt there are people that are on medication and people that leave rooms and they keep panicking, and they're leaving classrooms and they're leaving cinemas and they're getting overwhelmed. A lot of the time it can be regulated just by knowledge, just by knowing what's going on in your body. Yeah, that's increasing. Is it because of that? Maybe. A bit of tingling in my fingers. I know what that is. So just by acknowledging your body, that's process as opposed to reaction. So this is why breathing is important, because your inhale is completely different to your exhale. They do completely different things, and they affect your nervous system in completely different ways. So if you know your inward breath is sort of directly linked to your sympathetic nervous system, and it's more sympathetic by nature. If you imagine taking in you get a little release of adrenaline. You know, you can feel sort of tingling going down the back of your spine. You get a bit of a rush on a gasp like that. So your inhales are completely different. Your exhales are more parasympathetic by nature. So you're going to feel more relaxed on your exhale. Your heart rate slows down on your exhale. So we need to show kids how to do that. We need to show them how that works sensibly, so that they can use that breath as an anchor when they're doing their exams, when they're feeling anxious, when they're at home. They might be in an awkward situation at home, maybe, or they might have an awkward home life, or they might have, parents that are abusive or whatever, or they're being picked on at school or bullied. They need to be able to use their breathing to regulate their nervous systems, and it can be done quite effectively, quite quickly, because kids are clever, they're like sponges. They'll take up information really easily. And just by getting them to do really simple tasks like breathing through drinking straws or blowing in glasses of water and blowing up balloons, you can explain the mechanics of breathing and show them how it works. And they're fascinated generally when I try and teach this to kids, even my own kids, when I spoke to them about it, they're like, wow, that's amazing. And we need to learn more about how our bodies work, and that would take the pressure off the NHS, I think.
I definitely agree with that, because I think, what you said is so powerful. I think a lot of people don't understand their bodies. A lot of times, I mean, there's statistics on how many people get panic attacks, and they have absolutely no idea that they're having a panic attack. They think they're dying, and it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking, and it's sad. It's sad that that's the state of what some people find themselves in. And it's so important, to understand, if you want to control something, you need to understand how it works first. And I think understanding like what's happening in your body when you're in these states, like you said, it gives you kind of that foundation to regulate what's happening through the various tools. So I think it's such a powerful thing to have, that knowledge of this is what's happening physiologically in your body, and the reason, like, this is what causes this. You can even go as deep as like some of the hormones involved, and because we all know how beneficial kind of neuroplasticity, like how powerful neuroplasticity is. So it's understanding that, and then educating people on how to regulate that and manage that, and then overcome in the cases where they need to overcome that. And I think it's amazing that you mentioned the kids, because we need to start young, and we need to give them the correct tools, because there's so many dysregulated children that are, that we just send into the world, and they don't know how to, they've grown up in such chaos that they don't know how to find their equilibrium and to navigate the world in that chaos, with this chaotic frame of reference. It's difficult for them. Sure. They don't have the developed brain that we have to kind of, and some adults sometimes are a little bit questionable on the subject as well, but
definitely, without a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt.
But it's we need to protect their minds, and we need to give them the correct tools to go into the world and be regulated individuals.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. And ADHD is through the roof, and it's directly linked to breathing patterns. Believe it or not, it's directly linked to sleep problems. obviously sugar.
Yeah.
So there's a myriad of issues. These things, mobile
No.
phones, that are causing, huge amounts of issues. And not just because they're on them too long, but because they're physically changing your nervous system.
Mm.
They're affecting your response to stimulus. Because there's things that you can see on here that you shouldn't really be seeing, and the nervous system can't unsee them.
No.
Because that's how the nervous system works. So you have these 7-second environments that
Mm.
everybody's kids are looking at, and it's okay 1 minute, looking at beautiful buildings, and then it's like, oh wow, she's amazing, super fit, she's super strong, it's incredible, little panda's being born.
Yeah.
Oh, so cute. And then you swipe up and, oh my God, that's awful. But it's too late. You've already done this. You've
Mm.
already turned away. You've closed your eyes. You've held your breath. You've reacted to stimulus.
Yeah.
And you've done the things like, you close your eyes. Then you've created a habit to stimulus.
Yeah.
And this is why Stephen Jobs didn't give these to his kids, because he knew what they were doing. And these are causing a lot of issues. But it's too late now. We're in it. So what we have to do now is try and regulate how, or at least try and teach kids how to regulate their own nervous systems. It's no good putting ear defenders on kids with ADHD
No.
or with other conditions, trying to block out the stimulus. Why is that nervous system so overwhelmed by that normal stimulus? It shouldn't be overwhelmed by that normal stimulus. That nervous system is in a state of dysregulation. And for some reason, what we need to do is we need to go and find out what that dysregulation is and where it started, so that we can try and undo it.
Yeah.
What we're going to blindfold them next.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of where it's going. 80% of children in a study in America with ADHD were mouth breathing, snoring.
Wow.
And no children should be snoring. And well, no human should be snoring. Snoring is actually dysfunctional in humans. It's referred to in scientific terms as hypopnea, but it's intermittent breaks in your breath, in your respiration at night. So it's making you hypoxic as well.
Yeah.
So it's causing problems in your biochemistry, but it's also having other issues as well. Kids that that they're on adrenaline all day. They're breathing through their mouths. They're shallow breathers. And it's affecting them. They come home, they crash out in the afternoon. Sometimes kids with ADHD, and they're eating the wrong stuff. They can't sleep at night.
The beige diet.
Yeah, bad diets. They've got earphones on at night. They've got stimulus in the bedrooms, lights, spinning lights, sounds on, white noise, because the nervous system just needs constant stimulus all the time, because that's what it's used to, and it finds it very uncomfortable without it. Not all cases of ADHD, but a lot of them. The kids are struggling to sleep, and that's causing problems because they're not in good moods in the morning. They're noughty, and and they're a lot of them have got behavioural issues at school.
Yeah, and that's that's another thing to touch on is the school system is not really, I don't think it's really conducive to learning environment, the correct learning environment for children. It was founded in the Industrial Revolution era, where people needed to be disciplined, and they needed people to do as they're told. And that's not conducive for learning, because that restricts so much. It doesn't allow for questioning things, and we learn through investigating and questioning things and figuring it out, and being curious. But that's just not an environment for curiosity at all. And it's sad when you see the kids suffering because it's a convenience for adults, essentially, to have these systems the way they are. And I think that there's definitely investigation needed into, is this still the appropriate way to teach children? And especially for boys do not learn the same way girls do.
No, they don't.
They're so different, and why would you subject them? That's why boys tend to not do well in school, but they get to university and they absolutely, they do amazing, and they surpass the goals,
Sure.
you know.
Because they're doing something that they want to do,
Yes.
as opposed to being forced to do something that they don't want to do. So really, the education system really is unfit for purpose, almost, you know, because it just doesn't fit anymore. I've done so much work with teachers. I've done so many sessions with teachers, and they all say the same thing. I just need to. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I feel as though I can't do my job. I feel as though I can't teach. You know, I came into this job to teach kids, and they can't teach them. They're just fenced in by the system that doesn't allow them to teach these kids the way that they need to be taught. And there's a lot of kids with ADHD that are absolute geniuses, and that they're amazing at certain things. And what they're really good at is just being pushed to one side, and they've been put in groups because they're not up to scratch with this weird curriculum that they're still, like I said, this archaic curriculum that really working. And this isn't an attack on teachers; it's an attack on the system.
No, definitely.
It's the system that fails, you know, and you know, it's just not working anymore, you know. But some of the greatest minds and scientists, like Einstein, you know, he was autistic and he was allowed to perfect his craft. He just went off and did what he did best, and gave us so much, you know. But you've just got to allow people to do what they're good at, you know, and push them down that path. And that's gonna, you know, that's gonna help to reduce their symptoms and everything. It's all gonna help, you know, but it's a long way off. It's a long way off, you know, not in my,
but at least the conversations are happening, you know, and it needs to start there. You know, it needs to start with a conversation and questioning whether, is this the right way? Is this the best way? You know, not necessarily the right way, but is this the best way? Is this the best environment for learning? You know, does this raise free thinkers and critical thinkers, or does this restrict thinking? And, you know, I think these are the type of questions that lead to change. So yeah, I think that's very powerful.
Stop making kids too comfortable. You know, there's medals for first, second, third, fifth, fourth, fifth, eighth, 10th place medals these days.
Everyone gets a medal.
Everybody's a winner. You know, and although I can see the point in that, there isn't any point in it. You know, we're making them too comfortable. You know, and kids need to be uncomfortable too. They need to understand that it's okay to be uncomfortable and express their emotions. And they're told that it's okay to cry, boys. It's okay. It's okay to do that. You know, I was told specifically, you know, you don't cry. Don't let the other lads be crying. And that was the wrong message. You know, that's not the right thing to do. That really affected me, and I know it's affected other men as well. And it's allowed us to sit in our egos for too long, and you know, and not really allowing ourselves to be vulnerable when we're all vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, like, just I feel like with regards to the resilience, they went the opposite way of what they actually need to go. I think they went, you know, the kind of soft approach and put on the kid gloves and you know, make everyone comfortable, and we need to remove all the stresses, and we need to, you know, we need to make people feel as unthreatened and uncomfortable as they possibly can be. And that's just not the way to go about it when you're creating resilience, you know. If you look at all the approaches that they do at universities, at schools, you know, it's like, don't offend, you know, we need to be so careful to make sure that everyone has, you know, a safe space. And I thought that was the worst thing that anyone could do for someone that needs to build resilience, is like, let's just remove everything. Like, yes, to some extent, you know, but that's why therapy is a very controlled environment, and it's one-on-one, you know, it's very personalized. But you know, creating this general idea of safe space, and you know, not introducing necessary stresses, you know, it makes us less resilient.
Sure.
because
Sure.
we don't know how to respond anymore to these stresses. So this is why the work you're doing is really so valuable,
Sure.
because it's putting people in that uncomfortable position. And I'm pretty sure you know, obviously you don't force anyone doing it, because you like they have to make that decision for themselves. And like anyone that's in, you know, a very low mood or in a very high state of anxiety, like the only people that can really get them out is themselves, because they have to kind of change their perspective, to change their mindset. But I'm it's beneficial for you being there to kind of guide them through it, and, you know, encourage them and tell them, you know, you can do this.
Sure. Sure.
Like, you know, maybe that's what someone needs, as opposed to telling them, oh no, let's remove you from the stressful environment and put you in a safe space because you can't handle this. So now that's what that's the message that's coming across. Is like,
Sure.
you're not capable of handling these situations. And then they believe that about themselves, as opposed to telling them you can handle these situations and
Yeah.
you can thrive in them too. I think that's an important message to kind of get across to people, that they are capable.
Without a shadow of a doubt, everybody's capable of being uncomfortable, because we've all been uncomfortable. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. It's just part and parcel of being alive as a human being, that you're uncomfortable. As soon as you're born, you're uncomfortable. Because it's not quite as comfortable as the womb. So the
Yeah,
organism knows that it's not quite as comfortable out here as it is when it's in the womb for 9 months. You couldn't be in a safer space than that, could you?
yeah,
So the organism already makes a transition there. Eventually, it makes its way back to the breast and to feed and to warmth and to comfort and to co-regulation again. It's not quite as good as the womb, but it'll do, and so on and so forth. So you're in a state of constant flux of safety and vulnerability, and safety and vulnerability, and safety and vulnerability, and dopamine and no dopamine, and serotonin and no serotonin.
yeah,
So that's how the organism works. It adapts that way. And kids are just the same. They need to be coached in such a way that they understand the mechanism of that. So rather than reacting to what's going on, to stimulus, sometimes they're allowing themselves to process. They're allowing themselves to go through the emotion. They're allowing
yeah,
themselves to be angry, allowing themselves to be upset, allowing themselves to be happy when they need to be happy. So all these emotions that we all need to express on a daily basis, and not hold it back, because that's definitely making people ill. Definitely makes more women poorly, holding things back, pushing
yeah,
things away, than it does men. But women are empaths by default. Because you
mm,
create, so you're far more empathetic than us, really, as animals. So but more women have arthritis than men. More women suffer for things like ME and MS,
yeah,
fibromyalgia. There's a high percentage of women that suffer from that, not men. Why is that?
yeah,
There's a lot to do with holding back, for offspring. So, I think.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting, a conversation to have. It's like, why is this? Why is this happening? And our brains work so differently, and we've got different hormones running through our bodies. So that all plays a role. And in, regulation, like, men are more capable of, like, they have faster reaction time, and it all boils down to kind of like back in the day when men needed to hunt, and they needed to focus on things that were important and that were going to save their lives, essentially, because they had a very dangerous job. And women are more nurturing, because we needed to stay home and take care of the families and the children, and that kind of, we were homemakers. So we are biologically different. And I think to kind of deny that, we have differences is
Sure,
ignorant, to say
sure,
best. And we're not doing ourselves any favors. I think we're handicapping ourselves, and lying to ourselves and saying, we there's no differences, it's not helping.
sure. I mean, nobody's, obviously, it wouldn't go back to sort of the way things were in the 50s. Obviously,
No.
things were amazing in the 50s, but it wouldn't go back to that man and woman type relationship in the 50s.
No.
It wouldn't be like that. But we're definitely undoing some of the sort of some of the evolutionary mechanisms
Yeah.
by not being with our offspring for as long as we should be. And when I say we, I mean females. So that's definitely changing. So is that affecting offspring? Is it affecting nature, nurture? It is. You know, the science would suggest that is that, you know, if babies are not around their mothers and fathers, or, you know, people are, you know, women are bringing kids up on their own, and there's a male there at the beginning, and then all of a sudden he's not there, and she brings up the child on her own, that affects the child in a way. It does. We know it does. You know it does.
Yeah.
You know, and vice versa. You know, if guys bringing up the child on their own, there's no mother there, it does affect. You know, I know that's going to upset people, but it's fact. You know, and
we're not here to make people comfortable.
we're not here to make people comfortable. You know, these are evolutionary lessons, aren't they? And
yeah.
evolution knows far better than we do. You know, with these human brains that we have, we think we know a lot about our existence, but we know nothing.
No.
You know, millions and millions and millions of years of evolutionary perfection. This body, I was saying to Jazz, my mate last night, did a podcast with him last night. It's the human body is a symphony. It's a masterpiece, and it's taken millions and millions of years to get it to this perfection. You know, to be the sort of the dominant species, but we're making big mistakes. You know, and you talk about some of these mistakes sometimes, and people get offended by it, like with breastfeeding and stuff like that. There was less breastfeeding for ages, and there's some women who can't breastfeed. I understand that, I get that, and it's really sad that they can't do that. And of course, bottle feeding has made it available, you know, for people to, you know, it's saved, you know, countless babies' lives because they fed. But you know, back in the day, they had wet nurses and things like that. You know, if the Neanderthals, they would have just had multiple mothers for multiple children. They all would have fed each other's children.
Yeah.
It's how we got here. You know, so we make little changes to mankind, and it starts to affect human beings physically too.
Yeah.
You know, just, you know, the reduction in breastfeeding and increased bottle feeding has helped to change the shape of human faces, in fact.
Yeah.
You know, if you read books like Breath by James Nestor, he goes into a lot of detail as to how breastfeeding changes the shape of the mandible, you know, they change the shape of the human jaw.
Yeah.
So just subtle changes to how we live can affect humans forever, you know. So we really need to look a bit more closely, you know. Going on to the sort of breath work side of it, because the body keeps the score, it keeps the score on everything, you know, and it's keeping the score on your breath too. It's monitoring your breathing in every situation. My body's monitoring my breathing now because I'm talking more, and because I'm talking more, it means I'm taking recovery breaths through the mouth. It's watching that I'm doing that. It's very aware that I've probably got less oxygen now, a bit less oxygen than I had when I started, because I'm kind of hyperventilating a little bit. So, but it's watching changes in pressure. It's watching changes in humidity. The body is very, very sensitive to breath, but it's also sensitive to how you breathe. So when you're crying, you're breathing in a certain way. When you're laughing, you're breathing in a certain way. And all this affects the nervous system. But like I said, it does make a record of it, which is why when you do breathwork practice, it can sometimes make you incredibly emotional. Sometimes it can make you laugh out loud, tears of laughter. Sometimes it can make you sob like a baby. And, you know, that's why it's an excellent sort of stressor exercise again for the nervous system to sort of kind of regress a little bit. It shows you a bit of the past maybe, and it's interesting, and it's working with people, and it's been working with people for centuries. You know, this isn't new. This is something that they've done for centuries. It's just it's coming to the forefront now, and you know, social media is overwhelmed with you know, breath work and people gathering in these tents and doing these breath sessions, and people lying down and having these big releases, and these so-called releases of trauma, and people are being helped and cured, and being worked with, and it's an amazing thing. But also understand what's going on in your physiology and your anatomy when you're hyperventilating. It's important that you understand what that is, So I've been doing that for the last sort of few years. I'm not a qualified breathwork coach. As you mentioned before, I'm an advanced oxygen advantage instructor and a Buteco instructor, and I've worked with all sorts of people with asthma and COPD. I've had a load of success with it, and I've had great success myself, because it's almost completely removed my asthma.
Wow.
And I've had asthma for 40 years. So these techniques, they do work. They're slow. It's definitely slower than a ventilator inhaler. That works, but there are ways of undoing that if you're willing to put the work in. Again, be uncomfortable. And this is why people sometimes I've spoken to people in the past, said, look, the fact that you're snoring, you're breathing through your mouth a bit too much, and you're sleeping with your mouth open. It's okay, mate. I'll just take the CPAP. But don't you want to try and undo some of it? I'll show you some exercises that you can do. No, I'm quite happy with the CPAP now. I'm getting oxygen. I don't mind. So some people,
convenience, isn't it? It's convenience, isn't it?
You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So other people that come to me, I had one guy who came to me, Damien Healy, won't mind me mentioning his name, but he came to me with stage 2 COPD, and within 2 years, I'm almost certain it's about 2 years, he cycled from London to Paris on a bike, and he doesn't need to use an inhaler anymore. So
that's amazing.
And when he went back to hospital, and he was breathing into these machines, the nurses were like, "Well, what's going on? Why are you not taking any medication?" He said, "Because I've started to breathe through my nose. I've started to improve my lung capacity, and I've started to slow down my breath, and I've started to improve my chemo reflex in my body, so he doesn't react to CO2 like he did 2 years ago." So that's helped him to breathe. It's not cured the COPD. You can't cure that, but it's definitely improved his breathing so that he doesn't have to use medication. So that's a massive success, isn't it? The Buteco method and the oxygen advantage has been used to an amazing effect all over the world. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think when we had a talk, you also mentioned, like how important it is to kind of do this supervised and not just kind of like go off on your own, and the breath work specifically. So I don't know if you want to just touch a little bit on that, and just what are your thoughts kind of with regards to, because obviously I know there's a lot of people that will have scrolled social media, seen it, and then try it at home by themselves. Do you have like a caution against that?
I would really, really caution against doing any breath work, any hyperventilating on your own. Okay, any sort of transformative breath work where you're breathing for long periods of time, you're hyperventilating for long periods of time, because it changes your biochemistry. If you keep hyperventilating, you'll wash out too much carbon dioxide, and this can seriously affect your body. So much that you can sort of sometimes hold your breath enough to pass out. So you do have to be careful. It has to be regulated. There's some amazing breath coaches up and down this country. Steph Magenta's one of them at 7 Directions Breathwork. She's brilliant, and she holds safe space for people, but she also teaches instructors on how to hold space. But obviously there's people out there at the moment, charlatans that are out there at the moment trying to sell courses for people to learn to become a breath coach online. So you can qualified breathwork instructor all online without actually, holding space for somebody. How does that work? You need to be able to sit with people and witness their reaction and be in the same space as those individuals, in the same energy. It doesn't quite work like that. So you know, but you're going to get that in any kind of industry, aren't you? So, you know, there's people that
Yeah.
want to make money on mental health, and that's happening a lot out there.
Mhm.
There's people
Exactly.
in
It,
mental
it,
health.
it's like taking someone through, in therapy through a traumatic event and then leaving them in a heightened state and telling them goodbye, goodbye. It's dangerous. It's really dangerous. And I think, like you said, it's very important to go to a reputable person and do it under supervision of a reputable person,
Sure.
because I think this is also something we touched on. It's like it's a journey. You go through this journey to rediscover yourself and find who you truly are, because I think a lot of people today, if you ask them who are you, and they'll use like conditions to describe themselves, and
Brilliant.
that's become part of them. And your diagnosis is not who you are as a person.
Sure.
It you know you need to separate the two, because that's not who you are. Yes, that affects your life and your life quality in some sense, but that's not your identity.
No.
um you know and that's the thing. It's like, who are you? And then finding that, who that person is, through this journey that you take people on, is important.
It is, yeah, yeah, and I think you know working with people before you get them to do any breathing exercises is so important. So you've got this kind of this build up to doing the actual performing the actual breath practice, working with people, making sure that they're healthy, making sure that they're filling in the waiver forms, checking their medications, making sure they've not got high blood pressure, just making sure that they're good to do it, you know, that they're healthy to do it. And there's some people who really shouldn't be hyperventilating,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, sort of do your homework, you know, have a look at some people that have been doing this for a number of years, as opposed to just turning up in a tent and just say, yeah, come in guys, everybody, let's breathe. You know, it's going to be amazing. It's going to release all your traumas. You're going to be anxiety free. And this is what they're saying. They're trying to tell people that they're going to release their traumas, and what they're doing really a lot of times is taking the lid off Pandora's box, but they're not being able to sort of put the
Let's
lid back on again.
see.
Yeah, because there's no kind of integration afterwards.
Yeah.
And you know, what you need really is you need a practitioner to take you through the process and then explain what's happened, get you to
Yeah.
sort of get you to sort of process over the next sort of maybe 48 hours, maybe even longer, depends on how long their programs are or whatever. But you know, I know that
Mm.
people that I do any kind of regressive breath work with, I'm contacting them sometimes for weeks afterwards
Yeah.
and just saying, you know, how you doing, how you feeling, you know, what's going on, you know, where are you, have you been journaling, what have you been journaling about? They talk
Yeah.
to me and they tell me about their experience. I felt a bit this, that, and I felt a bit upset, and I felt a bit low this day. And it's just helping people to, and just telling me it's normal. But sometimes, you know, people go home after being to these events and they're like, wow, I feel dreadful.
Yeah.
You know, that was amazing. It was a great experience, but I just feel awful now. You know,
Mm.
I saw that I've not seen for a very long time, and why? You know, why did I feel like that again? And
Yeah.
it can be very dangerous, that.
Mm.
So it's something that we just have to be careful with. It's something that needs to be sort of regulated, so that make sure that people are not, you know, sort of going crazy with it,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. Because you need that de-escalation and you need a debrief afterwards. And
Sure.
like you said, every person's different, and you need to understand that you're dealing with an individual, and that follow-up is important. Some people will need one follow-up, and like you said, some people will need multiple follow-ups. It's all dependent, but it's getting them back to a state where they, functioning and reintegrated into society without any harm. And that's what it's important. You can't just do this online. It's not a cookie cutter thing, and
No.
can't just do an online, crash course with someone. I think that's very trading on very dangerous grounds.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. There's people out there that are offering Cambo online. There's people that are out there that are offering to do psilocybin journeys online.
Oh no.
I'm like, how how does that work? I mean, that's just insane. And I have seen people advertise to do cold water therapy online in vessels and containers. So just just do your homework. Just make sure that whoever you're going in with has has had some kind of training of some kind, or they're very experienced at doing it themselves.
Yeah.
So to make sure that they've got in and out of the water, and they at least know something about physiology, and they know how to regulate your nervous system when getting into the cold. And make sure that they understand human reaction to stress. That's really, really important. And pick somebody who you feel comfortable with. Pick somebody who you resonate with, because that's definitely going to make the whole transition easier. It's definitely going to make it, and the acclimatization, if you're getting into the cold, that's going to make that a lot easier. If you're with somebody that's going to make you feel safe.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. That trust is so important in these, very vulnerable journeys that we take people through. And I don't, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on today?
Just be wary, especially with the cold water stuff. Some of you watching this, or some of you out there, you're not going to be good for it. So just make sure that you're okay. Check your blood pressure. If you have to, go to your doctor. Just make sure that you're okay. Get your bloods done. Make sure that you're not anemic. I've worked with a lot of women who are anemic. You've just got to be careful. Make sure that you're not in your early stages of pregnancy. Just check for these things before you just go diving in into ice tanks, because you just have to be very, very, very careful. There's certain medications that you take that will affect the sort of percentage rate of of how more likely you're likely to get an arrhythmia in cold water by holding your breath and putting your head under. If you take certain medications, antihistamines, for instance. So just be very careful, and the people that take you in, they should be asking you these questions. They should be asking you, are you on any medication? Do you have any underlying medical conditions? Do you have migraines? Have you got high blood pressure? Are you on blood pressure medication? All these things, they should all be answered. And just to do it the safest way possible. There's an element of risk with anything, isn't there, Marilu? So if you go on a roller coaster, there's an element of risk in terms of your heart, increasing your blood pressure, your cardiac output. If you go on an aeroplane, there's a risk of that. If you go and jump out of an aeroplane in a parachute, there's a risk. A bungee jump, no matter what it is that you do, that's a little bit more extreme, there's risk involved. So we can't eliminate all the risk, but what we can do is just reduce some of it by being a little bit more sure as to what's going on in us. So just be careful. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on, if you're happy.
More than happy.
I think we had a really good conversation, and I know it diverged a little bit, and we branched out a little bit into other fields, but I think it was a very, very hopefully for the viewers and people who will be seeing this, it will be very helpful and beneficial to them. So yeah, you can reach out to Kevin on Instagram. At Breatheolution. And yes, and he'd be hopefully happy to assist you on your journey.
Sure, yeah. You can head to breatheolution.com as well, and I'm going to be running some cold water therapy instructor courses this year, one in July, one in September. So keep your eye out for that. If you want to take people into the cold, if you want to instruct people into the cold, if you want to be a cold water therapist, then just know what you're doing. Just know what you're doing,
Yeah. Yeah, and for myself, I'm launching my website next week. Exciting. Yeah, and my specialty is more behavioral change. So if you're in the market for that, then
everybody's in the market for that. Everybody.
Give me a shout.
There isn't anybody watching that isn't in the market for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Me
well,
included.
Kevin,
me included.
Yeah, well, I'll offer you a free session, friends session.
I'll offer the same back. I'll get you into a tank. I'll get you into a cold tank.
Thank you so much,
Thanks for
Kevin.
having
This was
me
I
on.
feel like
Thanks,
this was
Marilu.
such a amazing talk, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
so beneficial, you know. And I hope you have a really good evening.
and you take
Thank
care. Hope to
you.
see you. Take care. Cheers, love.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.